Hello everyone, welcome back to Let's Argue. We're at part 2 out of 3. Today we're going to be looking at more of your hot takes, controversial opinions, and everything in between that you decide to post on Twitter. Today I want to know what hot take you actually agree with. So if you're watching the video and you find a hot take and I disagree with it, or I even agree with it, it doesn't matter. Please let me know in the comments down below and we will find out which hot take is actually the least hot of them all. For now, be sure to take the... Let's get into that video. Parrying shouldn't be a thing the way it is implemented in this game. Only a few characters can actually use it and get something out of it. I think this is definitely true, but not for the reasons that kiting is explaining. I think almost all characters get something out of parrying. Yes, I do know you cannot always directly punish a move after parrying. I may choke. When I parry something, I don't get shit out of it because my frame data is just that bad. But you will stop any pressure just by using parry, and on top of that, parrying in itself is an option select versus falling aerials, which can really shift the dynamic of walling in this game, where if the opponent is walling, you can always shield it, and then you can time your parry for the last possible landing aerial timing, and from there you have a very favorable matchup. If they do it earlier, you simply shield it and get away with it, and if they do it later, then they might get a mix-up on you, but that kind of depends on the spacing as well. It really all kind of depends. That said, I do think parrying is not the most healthy mechanic. I think, as I mentioned, it kind of invalidates walling as a strategy in a lot of situations. It makes shields a lot better, which means that the offender often doesn't want to interact with shield at all because there's always a chance of a parry happening. So it promotes non-interaction, in my opinion. And promoting non-interaction, obviously not a good thing for the game's health. None of the stages are illegal. If melee players can play on Pokemon Stadium, we could have more interesting and varied stage lists. That is so untrue. I definitely think you're capping. Melee players play at Pokemon Stadium because they have to. There's really not enough alternatives, and not having Pokemon Stadium really ends up with a small change list, which is not ideal for variety. In addition, we do know that melee players want to freeze Pokemon Stadium. That's the degree of how bad the stage is. I actually think we do have a relatively small stage list. I think some of the stages could be legal, like Yoshi's, like Unova, but in general we're doing fine. More stages should not be legal for the sake of having more stages legal. More stages should be legal if they pass the viable stage checklist, which means like no intrusive hazards, no unsymmetrical elements, no swinginess in terms of like Blast Zone, like WarioWare, definitely too swingy of a stage to really get consistent results on, I should say. So there, like, I don't have a set in stone list for this stuff, but there definitely should be a list of criteria by which we judge stages to be legal or not. Joker is not top 5 and carried by MK Leo. Bad take for sure. In this game, mid-range is paramount. I've talked about this before. You don't want to play at the long range because it's easily reactable. You don't want to play in the close range because it's basically very random. You don't have a lot of control over the outcome of a situation because of how directly of an RPS you're playing and how unpredictable an opponent can be, especially the moment at which they adapt, which is almost impossible to reach. You don't know if your opponent adapts, if they suddenly decide to do something different. There's only a guessing game there, like RPS is, which is extremely inconsistent. So what is left is kind of the mid-range, where you can definitely try to weave around your opponents, bait things out, and play a more consistent reaction-based game plan. And one of the best characters in the game at doing that is Joker, because of their dash animation, because of their dash speed, because of their burst range, and because of having one of, if not the best fast fall in the game with that 90% speed increase on the fall. On top of that, Joker has an amazing lasting aerial and neutral air, a good grab game with good grab reward, which is extremely paramount to being a good character in this game, and on top of that, also some projectiles to kind of accentuate the mid to long range and really help his baiting game out. So yeah, definitely capping Joker is amazing. He's just really hard to use because of how much he focuses on movement and on non-interaction and trying to bait your opponent into a bad situation and try to capitalize on that. It's a very methodical, slow game plan that requires a lot of experience, knowledge, and execution, and most players just cannot do that. MK Leo being the best example of a player that can push Joker to his limits. There's no such thing as a tricky character. It's an umbrella term used for characters that people don't know how to fight against and hide the matchup inexperience. I hate these type of takes. I hate these type of takes where they're like, there are no bad matchups, it's just that someone doesn't want to practice or whatever. Like, you are assigning a quality to a large group of people that simply use a term that is a little bit vaguely defined, but I do think there is a definition for a tricky character. It's usually a character that has a lot of nuances to them, or a lot of aspects that are harder to learn or take more time to learn or are different than other characters. Like PacMan is a tricky character because he summons the hydrant, he has the charge projectile which changes into different projectiles. Shulk is a tricky character because he has multiple modes with his Monados, they have cooldowns which are time based, just a lot of different stuff that you don't see usually. This makes for a tricky character, and it's just harder to learn. It's not a term to hide inexperience, it's a term to say this character matchup is harder to learn, which is true for tricky characters that have a lot of nuance to them. Definitely not something I agree with. Pac isn't high tier. The character lacks range and some of his best moves are laggy. Nair being active from frame 3, which is extremely fast by the way, that's crazy, to 19 and has a total of 51 frames with a decreasing hitbox. His recovery is also susceptible to gimps and 2 frames when done right. He also lacks good moves to initiate a neutral, making him very dependent on the opponent initiating for any interaction to take place. His lack of reliable kill confirms outside of Bell also hurts him when he needs to kill an opponent quickly, Lucario or Terry for example. So it's a little bit hard to judge this one because it's kind of a mixed bag. I think on one hand, yes, PacMan does have some weaknesses, especially as he mentioned, in that he's very bad at initiating neutral interactions himself. On the other hand, he's so good at reacting to his opponent's initiations, he can create his own hazards, and he has a charged projectile. Not a lot of characters have charged projectiles, and those that do have some of the best long range in the game. I'm talking Samus, I'm talking Mewtwo, I'm talking Wii Fit Trainer, I'm talking even Lucario when he's at higher percents, he got that big aura sphere, and now there's PacMan Neutral B, also an amazing charged projectile. I don't think his best moves are laggy actually. I think Neutral Air, I mean yes, sure, it's 51 frames total, but when you're doing a short hop fast fall, you're never gonna last the entire 51 frames. You're gonna make a lot of use out of how long the hitbox is active and how fast it starts up. Let's not forget guys, PacMan's some of the best close quarters in the game. If you're playing mid-range, you're playing around the Galaga or the Bell, which occupies so much space. He also has a mid-range grab, which, while not the fastest, can really mix you up, especially when you're busy playing around these projectiles. Plus the hydrant right there definitely gives him a lot of vertical control as well, which is very unusual in Smash in general. If you think Pac isn't high tier, you're straight capping. The character is still really good. It's a little bit hard to judge the character because there's so few mains that are really dedicated to the character, and if you don't know the matchup perfectly, the character becomes that much stronger because of how many setups and traps and gimmicks the character has. That said, amazing long range game, decent mid-range game, and an amazing close quarter boxing game. He's bad at initiating, but he's really good at forcing the opponent to initiate through that charge projectile, through the hydrant, really controlling space, forcing your opponent to do something, and then you can kind of capitalize on that from there. He has a dash attack that's extremely safe on shield as well, and up out of shield, a lot of good tools. So yeah, Pac, definitely high tier. Is he as broken as some people make him out to be? Of course not, but I mean, that's just Twitter for you, of course. Let's get into the next question. Ganon is somewhat underrated, not the worst and also not bottom 2, because his punish game/advantage state is absurd compared to other low tiers. On paper he might be the worst, but in a practice setting that is definitely not the case. I 100% agree with this take. It's a very good take by Sword right here. I don't think Ganondorf is the worst character in the game. I actually do think he has a good semblance of viability. If you do play the matchup correctly and you are comfortable and in like a relaxed setting, it becomes a lot easier than in a tournament setting where one punish can cost you dearly versus Ganondorf. It's not for nothing that Nairo did beat Light with that Ganondorf versus Fox, even if it was early in the metagame. It just shows that the character has the possibility to win if you have a good read on the opponent. On top of that, I do still personally believe that Kirby is the worst character in the game, so it cannot even be Ganondorf. But yeah, that is an entirely different discussion, not for today. But yeah, Sword is correct, Ganondorf somewhat underrated, not worst in the game. Smashville should be a double stage. This one is interesting, so I don't agree with the premise here. Double stages should not exist at all. Why not? Because anytime you play a doubles match, you have the potential of the doubles match turning into a 1v1 match, which actually happens pretty frequently in my experience, especially at like a mid-level of play where there could be a 1v2 comeback and it could come down to that 1v1 scenario. And yeah, so on that front, I don't think Smashville should be a double stage because I don't think there should be double stages. I actually think we should have a stage list that is universal. Hero should be banned. Hero is not tournament viable. I definitely see where this is coming from. The language barrier is a big issue, but I have seen heroes say before that it's very easy to learn all the spells in a different language. My suggestion for a compromise here is that the hero's opponent can decide the language, and then the pressure is on the hero to learn every language that comes with it. I think that is the only way for hero to be tournament viable, if we let the opponent decide the language and go from there. As always guys, thank you so very much for watching the video. If you want to drop a comment or a like, really do appreciate it. It does help out the channel. Sharing it around, really appreciate it as well. Stay tuned for episode 3, which is going to be the final episode of the mini-series before we end the first official episode of Let's Argue. Guys, once again, thank you so very much for watching, and as always, stay smart.